Hello comrades, my name is Red Army 1, and it has been a long time since I put out a Tactics Tuesday. This one isn't even on a Tuesday, this is a Thursday now. That's because I tried to upload one on Tuesday, but it was too long, so I couldn't do it. And then Wednesday I didn't have time, so today on Thursday it is uploaded for you guys. So, it being Thursday, and also the day that Vikings comes back, the TV show, I thought that I'd give you a little bit of a somewhat history lesson more than tactics today. There's one character in the show whose name is Rollon, and he is the brother of King Ragnar. Spoilers in this video if I give away some of the episodes that you haven't seen yet, I apologize. But there's Ragnar and there's Rollon. Ragnar is king, Rollon is his brother. Now they fought in the past in the show about going on 2 times now. But that's the show. In real life, Ragnar, or King Ragnar, we are not very sure if he was based off a real character, if there was a real physical person or entity called Ragnar Lothbroc. But we do know, and we have in, I believe it's the Danish Museum of History or something like that, a late Viking text about yay thick entitled The Legend of Ragnar Lothbroc. And this is about him, his family, and everything like that. It talks about how he goes to England, he discovers it, they raid for many years and things like that, and everything. He lived, or even if he was a real person, he's suspected to have lived in the late 790s to possibly the early 800s. Whereas his brother Rollon, in the show, we know of him to be an actual historical figure. He was he was a Viking, he was an explorer, and he lived in, I believe it was the late or early 900s, late 890s, and he went to England and everything, and explored and raided, and then they went to a place called Francia, obviously France, in modern time. And in Francia, he was in many battles there and everything. He and his band of Viking raiders raided Paris more than a few times, and they did this until one day the king of Paris paid them money to go away. And for many of them, they do. They have their loot and they go home. But what Rollon and his band of Vikings do in, I believe it is sometime in 920-ish, 9-teens, 920s, something like that. They go to England, or they go to Paris, they raid, they don't raid, they get paid the money by the king, and the king thinks, okay, they'll go again and go home, but they stay. And at first this turns out to be a horrifying thing to the Parisians, or Frankians, I don't know. And because they have these Viking warriors that were originally raiding Paris and Francia, and now that we paid them money, they're not going away like they wanted, or like the French wanted. So this becomes a problem for a while. But what winds up happening is the French king says, okay, this is a good thing. This is good, because if you've seen a map of France and a map of Paris, you'll see that Paris is based here, and the River Seine goes from the English Channel all the way down into and by Paris. Nowadays it's right through Paris, but originally it sat right beside the River Seine. And this is a good thing for the king of Paris, because now what he can do is, okay, he's paid the Vikings, and he talks to Rollo, and Rollo is actually not his real Viking name. We don't know what his real Viking name was. Rollo was a name given to him by the Franks, and it's not actually Rollo, it's Rollon, Rollon, and the English then just say Rollo, and that's why in the show and later in history he's now Rollo. But he and his band of raiders stay and everything, and he talks to the king of Paris, and they make a deal. He marries, and this is spoilers for the show, he marries, historically, the king of Paris' daughter, and he becomes a duke of Paris, or a duke of the region which he founds, and the king places him and his Vikings at the front of the River Seine, at the English Channel, in a place now famous for D-Day, at a place called Normandy. Rollo, or Rollon, is the founder of Normandy, and he's a Viking. And the basis of this and the whole idea of this sounds completely mad and completely insane, but it makes a lot of sense. Because now, Rollo, or Rollon, is a duke. He's getting paid by the French king, and his band of raiders are still raiding and getting paid. They don't mind. And they have a simple job. They are there as Vikings on Normandy, at the base of the River Seine, and they have one job. Keep other Vikings away from entering the River Seine to go to Paris. Now, this eventually becomes a problem a few times, because other Viking warriors come in mass numbers to Normandy, and there's great battles, but the Vikings of Rollon seem to just defend, and none of them get to Paris. We don't know whether or not there were mass battles. We suspect that perhaps Rollon had the Vikings come over. There may have been certain skirmishes on Normandy, and then the Vikings would have just gone. But perhaps we think nowadays Rollon would have just spoken to them and said, hey, you know, we're here, this is our land, this is where we live, get out, kind of thing, you know? Because perhaps there were Vikings where, and this is just a bit of a hypothetical theory of mine, perhaps there was Vikings that came and they have never been to England or France, they've never seen Paris, they just want to know, is, like, Paris a real place, as rich as they say? But of course, being raided so many times by the Vikings, it's not at this point. So perhaps, and I think this is my theory, Vikings would have come over, perhaps Rollon would have talked to them and said, hey, yeah, no, that city no longer exists, we've burned it, we've raided it, that sort of thing, you guys can go on home, we're just heading home ourselves, and that's perhaps, if they had talked it out, how the Vikings would have left. But if not, obviously, Rollon and his Vikings would have had to fight off the invading Vikings. So just a little recap here. Rollon, or Rollo, historically accurate, is a person. Ragnar, the legend, is based perhaps off of a real individual. We have no knowledge of this. We have no grave to say that there is a Ragnar. We have no other evidence other than this script written in about the, I believe it's about 11th, 12th century in Norman text, and it just is a Viking book that depicts Ragnar Lothbroc and his story of finding England and everything. And interestingly enough, in the show, again, bit of spoilers, Rollo and Ragnar were not brothers. And a bit of some of you, if you're a fan of the show watching this, you're probably shocked, but they were not brothers. Ragnar Lothbroc, if he was an individual, lived, and it's said in the story, and I think I've said this in the video already, he lived early on, late 790s, early 800s. Rollo, or Rollon, his brother, lived much later than this suspected Ragnar. He lived in the late 890s to early 900s. And so they obviously would never have been brothers. They would have never known each other. Perhaps Rollon grew up knowing the legend of Ragnar Lothbroc, but we can't say for sure. And just interesting fact, Rollon, or Rollo, who is the founder of Normandy, he dies and his body is put in a tomb in, where is it? It's now, I believe, in a museum in Normandy with a few other famous Normans, as his descendant William the Conqueror is. And it's a bit fascinating. If you ever get a chance to go there and to see him, it's fairly fascinating. To see Rollo, or Rollon, and his descendant William the Conqueror. It's pretty interesting. So, that about wraps it up for this Not So Tactics Tuesday, but I had to give you one because it's been such a long time. There will be another one this week, probably tomorrow. That will be on the bit of Canadian history here, because on Monday it was here in Canada, at least where I am in Manitoba, it was Louis Riel Day. But around the rest of the country it was Canada Day, or it was Family Day, not Canada Day, and everything like that. And that was the first video I tried to give to you guys, but it was way too long. And I see now this one's pushing at about 12 minutes. So I think I'm going to end it here. Louis Riel and the Métis Rebellion will be tomorrow's Tactics Friday special or something. And that was it. This was the history of Rollo, or Rollon, and Ragnar Lothbroc, and the story of what they did in the show and things like that. And special tonight for all you Vikings fans out there, you're stoked for tonight's new season as I am. So, Red Army 1, signing off.